Why? Oh, how about we go to the library and search about it? Let's go!
Hi, so Laura and I here, and we're taking a sea train to go to the library. And right now, a lot of multicultural
City Hall
people
Station.
in this place. Lucy, like, shoot around. And now we need to get off.
City Hall Station.
Point of view. La 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 la. It's so shaky.
Louis Hippolyte Lafontaine and Robert Baldwin are best known in Canadian history to be the architects of responsible government, a government that answers to the people rather than British-appointed governors. They are also one of the first founding people to acknowledge and promote the idea of pluralism and multiculturalism in Canada, as they opposed the plan to assimilate the French and also worked together to preserve and promote the French culture. This event is very significant in this cultural sense because its results shape our mosaic society today. Before they succeed in enlisting French as an official language in the legislature in Canada, the British had an overwhelming control in the government and it did not consider the interests of the French culture in Canada at all. At the time, cooperation is not yet an option, and the French was not accommodated or respected despite the fact that their population was much greater than the English. But with the effort of the two men, the French began to gain their deserved influence in the government. This event unified Canadians because not only did it introduce French back into the legislature, it is also a symbol of cultural acceptance in the society. Everyone's voice can be heard instead of being silent and marginalized. The responsible government also ensures that the government would do the best to accommodate to the values and interests of the local people than enforcing the British colonist ideals.
Lucy, what are you doing?
Well, I'm just on the computer looking at significant events in Canada. Would you want to look at them with me?
Sure.
Alright, let's do this.
In 1884, white settlers of the Northwest Territories had grievances against the government of Canada. They accused the government of operating the land to the detriment of local interests. They were unhappy with the CPR monopoly and tariffs on manufactured goods. The natives and Métis had signed treaties giving up their land in agreement to settle on reserves. The natives felt cheated and that their way of life was taken away. It was also a time of famine, and the natives were short on crops and buffaloes. Some wanted parts of their land back, and some demanded food and support that were promised in the treaties which the government never tended to. Louis Riel, the leader of the Red River Resistance, returned to Saskatchewan in Canada and worked together with the natives, Métis, and settlers to publish a manifesto of grievance to the Secretary of State in Ottawa. However, the government never responded to their demand. Riel and his Métis group decided to take up arms against the government. Although the white settlers originally supported Riel in his petition, they withdrew from his plan. Riel's organized rebellion ended when they were defeated at the Battle of Batoche. Riel surrendered and was sentenced to be hanged. This event is significant to the multicultural identity of Canada because it was an event in which people of different background and culture gathered together to demand change in the government so that their way of life could be respected and cultural marginalization can be prevented. It was also a picture of different cultures uniting together to attain a better future. The rebellion also served as a reminder to all Canadians that the federal government was not all that well done in respecting other cultures in history. It did not provide cultural protection or fitting accommodation to the minorities, and this is evident in the grievance of the people. The government's attitude was rather condescending and did not heed the voices of the different groups. It was not very responsible.
Oh look, there's Lorna. Hey Lorna,
Hi, Lucy.
what you doing?
Reading books.
What kind of books?
I actually don't know. They're all in different languages like Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Bengal, French, Vietnamese.
So why are there so many different kind of language in Canada?
Immigration, maybe?
The federal government passed an amended Immigration Act in 1952. This act established the rights of admission to Canada for prospective immigrants, as well as illegal immigrants already in Canada. It enables governor and consul to deny entry on cultural, climatic, and social basis. This act in 1952 allowed British subjects, French citizens, and American residents into the country. It also provided family unification for Asian Canadian citizens who have immediate relatives overseas. However, Asians without close relatives already living in Canada were not allowed in, and Canada only allows certain numbers of immigrants from ethnic groups of the government's choosing. For example, only 150 nationals were allowed from India per year. This act is significant to the multicultural identity of Canada because it was an act that created disunity. It is hypocritical in a sense because although it did not explicitly discriminate against specific groups of immigrants, it granted the cabinet permission to deny people's entry on the basis of their background. This deception allowed the Canadian government to escape criticism from other countries while keeping Canada's minorities to a minimum. This created distress for immigrants as the preference for European and British immigrants was apparent. This act in 1952 was a representation of the government showing that it had not yet abandoned the tendency to discriminate against other cultures. The Royal Commission on Bilingualism and Biculturalism was established in 1963. Its mission was to explore and recommend ways of creating unity while enhancing the dual nature of Canada. Before the commission was established, there were problems in Canada regarding the idea of it being bicultural. More Quebecois were in favor of a Quebec nationalism rather than a Canadian multicultural nationalism, as they invest in the idea that sovereignty is their solution towards social equality and financial wellness of the Quebecois nation. Other than the separatism that was being promoted in Quebec, some French-speaking communities outside of Quebec were also being shunned from speaking French, and some provinces had rules that banned the teaching and usage of French language from school and legislature altogether. The final report of the commission showed that the Francophones in Canada were underrepresented, in that most Francophones were denied positions of economic and political power, and also educational opportunities outside of Quebec. It also wasn't easy for Francophones to seek jobs or federal service because of their language barrier. The government bounced into action to implement the recommendations of commission. Some minority cultures were not happy with the commission as they believed that its focus was too narrow and lacked acknowledgement of cultures other than the French. This was a significant event that constructed the multicultural nationalism of Canada because it was unifying in the sense that the government would invest time and money into improving the vision of a mosaic society. The commission recommended Ontario and New Brunswick to become bilingual provinces so that the relations between the French and the English can improve, and that there was greater feeling of equality among the two nations. The Official Language Act was created as a result of this commission, and the commission also had some influence on Trudeau on his decision to make Canada multicultural instead of bicultural. The Official Language Act affirmed the equal status of English and French, preserved and developed official language communities, ensures that federal service is available in both languages and that both Francophone and Anglophones have equal opportunities to participate in the parliament and federal institutions.
Lucy, where are we?
We're in Chinatown.
We're in China?
No, Chinatown in Calgary.
What?
In 1971, Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau declared that Canada would adopt multicultural policy where the diverse cultures in Canada would be recognized and respected. It is the first country to declare multiculturalism as a state policy. The Canadian Multiculturalism Act was officially recognized in Section 27 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms in 1988. This act recognizes and promotes the understanding of multiculturalism and that it enforces the policies of the government such that it acknowledges the freedom of all members of Canadian society to preserve, enhance, and share their cultural heritage. It is significant as a fundamental characteristic of the Canadian heritage and identity, and it shapes Canada's future as a pluralistic society because within the Act, it recognizes the right to speak the languages of their cultures, other than the official language, and also the freedom to promote the culture of different groups in Canada, whether they're minority or majority. Therefore, it affirms the idea that Canada is an open-minded state and that it does not marginalize any group, and no group will be subjected to inequality and discrimination. It offers cultural protection for the groups as it clearly expresses the idea that the government is not pressuring anyone to fall under the dominance of any majorities. As a result, there are multicultural festivals where exotic international food and drink, traditional world music, and dances are promoted. There are also different multicultural programs and educational months in Canada to encourage newcomers of different ethnicity to feel welcome into society. For example, the Black History Month and Asian Heritage Month. Ethnic television channels are also created, for example, Omni TV. The basis of this nation is all about multiculturalism, and having tolerance and acceptance are the key to unity. Although from the events we just looked at, it seems this path had not been easy, but the time is changing and we predict that the sense of belonging to a multicultural nation will only become stronger. People will not be bound to language or ethnicity, but the idea that we all belong to a society where the idea of celebrating all cultures binds us together. This is the Canadian nationalism that we envision. The fact that Pierre Trudeau decided to make Canada multicultural supported our vision. The government also apologized for the social injustice it did to different cultures in the past, and this demonstrated the willingness of the government to construct a mosaic society that will be fair once and for all.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land. True Asian land. Okay, that's it. What a waste. You should drink it.
What?